Color is comprised of 8 tabs at the top of the application window. These are referred to as 8 separate rooms for performing color correction. These tabs can be navigated with either the mouse, keyboard, or an optional control surface. Press Command 1 for the first tab, Command 2 for the second, and so on. The flat gray appearance of the interface is extremely intentional. It helps to neutralize contrast biases that would otherwise lead to incorrect color corrections. Color is optimized for working with dual displays. To switch between single and dual display modes on the next launch of the application, choose Window, then Single or Dual Display Mode. The layout of the 8 tabs, or rooms, is also intentional. There's a progression from left to right as grading proceeds. A job is initiated in the Setup tab, then initial primary color corrections are performed in the Primary In tab, and so on. This is also the order in which color corrections are applied. Primary In corrections first, then secondaries, then color effects, then primary out corrections. The timeline at the base of the user interface will typically display a thumbnail representation of each clip. The size of the thumbnail can be changed by clicking on the track line underneath the thumbnail and dragging either up, smaller, or down, larger. Use Command plus and minus to zoom in or out, and the middle mouse button to pan. You'll notice underneath the clip thumbnail a blue tab called Grade 1. Each clip will by default come with a Grade 1. This is a visual representation of the current look you're developing or have developed and is referred to as a hot grade. You can have up to 4 grades per clip. Coming from Final Cut Pro, setup is essentially taken care of for you. To send your sequence from Final Cut Pro to Color for editing, select your sequence in the browser and choose File, Send to, Color. Choose a name for the project and click OK. Color launches and you're presented with a set of options. Activate Broadcast Safe by selecting it and use Advanced Conform options if necessary. You can always modify Broadcast Safe settings later. After you click Import, your footage is added and your sequence should be visible in the timeline at the base of the interface. The Setup tab is designed to perform multiple functions. Personal Preferences, Project Settings, and Media are all handled in the sub-tabs found at the base of the right pane. New footage is imported into a project using the file browser occupying the left pane of the Setup tab. Use the Up and Home buttons at top left to navigate to footage on your hard drive. Files identified as valid content will be displayed as thumbnails. Clicking a thumbnail will display additional metadata, shot name, duration, codec, resolution, frame rate, and timecode. Underneath the preview thumbnail with the metadata is an import button that when clicked will place the clip into the timeline. If you've sent a Final Cut Pro project to Color, you'll see your compiled sequence displayed just as you arranged it in Final Cut Pro. Any new clips you import are added to the end of the timeline. The right pane defaults to the shot list area. Here, all the shots that are currently in the timeline will be displayed as a list. The list is sorted sequentially from top to bottom. The shot list contains the following information: shot number, shot name, colorist, status, reconform, and notes. Change to an icon view to see clips represented as tiles, much like the DVD Studio Pro graphical view. Click and drag the shot names at the base of the thumbnails to rearrange them. Shift-click to select multiple shots and then press G to group them. This is useful for applying the same grading settings to several clips at once. Each clip name is appended with a shot number. Enter this number in the Go to Shot field to instantly jump to that shot in the timeline. Next is the Grade Bin tab. Here you store the entire look, grade, or color correction. Color creates thumbnails whenever a grade is saved. Whatever frame you're on during the saved grade is what Color will use for the bin. The grade bin is a global look, meaning everything that was used to create that particular look is saved. The Project Settings tab provides all the particulars about a project, like colorist name, project resolution, project name, render directory, and so on. Of important note, this is where you enable Broadcast Safe. In the Messages tab, color communicates important information. All messages are color-coded by importance. White text is normal, yellow text is important, and red text usually requires your attention. Finally, the User Preferences tab offers a variety of customization options. Among other things, the information displayed in the timeline can be controlled here, along with the colors used within the timeline. On the right-hand side are a series of radio buttons for advanced features, but important to note is the autosave functionality. You control the amount of time that passes between autosaves. The default is 5 minutes. The Primary In tab is where your grading begins. The design is straightforward. On the left, you have a bin for storing the primary in looks you want to save. One of the most powerful features in Color is the ability to create looks and store them for future use. The hardest part of grading is creating the looks you want in the first place. So, after you've achieved the look you want, just save it into the bin. To use the looks later on, simply double-click on the thumbnail of the look you want, and it will be applied to the clip your playhead is currently parked on. The 3 color hue wheels at the top middle give you the ability to control hue for shadows, left wheel, midtones, center wheel, and highlights, the right wheel. The sliders to the right provide fine control over the settings. The first 2, hue and saturation, perform the same function as clicking and dragging inside a hue wheel. The last slider is the luminance slider. The luminance sliders are really used for lift, gamma, gain controls. Below the hue wheels are curve editors for performing curve-based color corrections of individual RGB channels or the overall image luminance. Whenever you make any changes to any color values in Color, you'll notice that the user interface displays a small cyan color dot. This is the reset dot. By clicking on any particular dot, it will reset that value to the base value. To the right of the hue wheels are numeric entry fields corresponding to the visual interface controls. These are arranged into a basic tab and an advanced tab. Double-click to edit a value. If you're using a 3-button mouse, clicking and dragging up and down with the middle mouse button will also adjust values. When working with a Mighty Mouse, be sure you've set the middle mouse button function to button 3 in your system preferences. Color has a very powerful set of scopes. These scopes are the X-ray into your clip. Learn to use them and they will help you immensely. As the vector scope helps you to understand the color of your clip, the waveform monitor helps you understand the balance of your color. After you've balanced your entire image in the Primary In tab, you can now work with a specific area of color. The Secondaries tab provides you with all the tools you'll need to perform these localized corrections. Secondary color correction is very similar to primary color correction. In fact, the basic color correction tools are identical. The difference lies in how secondary color correction is applied to the image. Unlike a primary color correction, which is applied to the entire image, a secondary color correction can be isolated to a specific portion of the image. You'll notice at first glance that the Secondaries tab looks similar to the Primary In tab. The storage bin to the left works exactly the same as the one in the Primary In tab, although this time secondary looks are stored here. The Secondaries tab differs greatly when it comes to the lower group of controls. Color offers up to 8 secondaries within a given shot on the timeline. Click one of the 8 sub-tabs at the base of the Secondaries tab to view controls for that secondary. Each secondary must first be enabled by clicking the Enabled button at the top left of the tab. Once a secondary has been enabled, use the eyedropper tool at the top right-hand side of the interface. Clicking on the eyedropper allows you to choose a specific area of color in your image. Only colors whose hue, saturation, and lightness fall within the ranges you set on these controls will now be considered for secondary color correction. Next to the eyedropper are hue, saturation, and luminance sliders called HSL qualifiers. The sliders allow you to very precisely control the area of your image you're attempting to isolate. To adjust the sliders, simply click on the white line on either the left or right-hand side of the slider and then drag. You'll need to have the Preview tab selected in the user interface to see the isolating mask being built. You can also deselect any one of the HSL sliders if you so choose. You can also click and drag over the image. As you move the mouse pointer over more pixels, the HSL qualification will grow to include all pixels rolled over. And to eliminate the artifacts introduced by film grain and other noise within the image, increase the key blur. Below the HSL sliders are 6 color patches: red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow. These 6 colors allow you to easily select just those colors in your clip without having to use either the eyedropper or HSL slider tools. They work best when you can see these predominant colors in your clip. For the first color, hold down the Command key on the keyboard while you click on one of the 6 colors. You can also increase or add additional colors by clicking without holding down the Command key. Because secondary color correction involves isolation, it's possible to color correct the inside of the isolated region differently than the outside. The Inside-Outside pop-up menu is used to define which portion of the secondary is currently being worked on. Previews are used when setting up HSL qualifiers and vignettes. When the Preview tab is selected, the main display will also switch into preview mode. The right preview window shows the current mask. White areas will be affected by the inside color correction, while black areas will be affected by the outside color correction. Also, any active vignette will be displayed. Buttons to the right of the Previews tab allow you to choose between 3 different modes for the preview display. Choose between the final color-corrected image, a desaturated preview which shows only qualified areas of the image in color, and a matte-only preview. By selecting the Final Image option, you can see the color corrections you're performing and still see the qualified area displayed in the right-hand display of the Previews tab. Vignettes are shapes which can be used to further isolate a secondary. To enable a vignette, click on the Vignette checkbox. There are 3 settings within the shape pop-up for vignettes: square, circle, and user shape. There are also controls for angle, position, X center, Y center, softness, fall off, size, and aspect ratio. Finally, you have 2 reset buttons below the Basic and Advanced tabs. To reset the current secondary, click the Reset Secondary button. To reset all the secondaries you've enabled, click Reset All Secondaries. The Color Effects tab allows you to create virtually any desired look by a simple combination of effect nodes. Like the primary in and secondary tabs, Color Effects looks can be saved into a bin for future use. Using the Color Effects tab is actually quite straightforward. One effect is fed into another until the final result is fed to the output. The top effect node has no connection to its input, since it's being fed the image coming from the Secondaries tab. The Color Effects tab is divided into 3 main areas. On the left side are the nodes, in the middle is the workspace, and on the right are the parameter and bin tabs. Click and drag an effect node to bring it into the workspace. The first node will always come with an output node attached to it. When you wish to add another node, just click and drag a node over to the line between existing effect nodes in the workspace. click on a node to edit its parameters in the right-hand pane. The Bypass button will bypass the selected node from the node tree. To change the connections between effect nodes, click and drag from the output triangle of one node to the input triangle of another, or vice versa. To delete a node, just select it and press the Delete key. As intimidating as it initially seems, creating custom effects with the node tree is extremely easy. Here, a simple grainy black and white effect is created. First, the black and white node is dragged into the workspace. You'll instantly see the effect of the node in the main display. The output node is then dragged down a little purely to make room for the next node. Now, a film grain node is dragged onto the connecting line between the black and white and output nodes. Because the film grain node is selected, its parameters are visible to the right. The grain size is increased to 5000 to create an extreme grain effect, and the grain color is set to monochrome. Pressing this spacebar provides a preview of the final look. Press the spacebar again to halt playback. Clicking Bypass in the parameters disables the node's effect, removing the grain. Once you're happy with a particular effect, click over to the Color Effects bin to save it for future use. Name it appropriately, then click Save. In future, whenever you need that effect, just drag it from the Color Effects bin into the workspace. The remaining tabs or rooms in the interface are Primary Out, Geometry, Still Store, and the Render Queue. The Primary Out tab is nearly identical to the Primary In tab, with the exception that the color corrections here are applied to clips after Primary In, Secondary, and Color Effects. You'll also notice Broadcast Safe controls. The Geometry tab provides tools for scale, rotation, pan and scan, flip and flop, motion tracking, and custom user-defined vignette shapes. 3 sub-tabs determine the contents of the right-hand pane. With the Pan and Scan tab selected, you'll notice a rectangle surrounding the frame from your clip. If you can't see the edges of the shot, Control-click or right-click and drag to zoom the view. The area inside the rectangle is the final, full-frame image output. You can click on the handles at the corners of the rectangle to scale the frame, or you can change the numerical values in the fields to the right. In the course of working with content, you'll oftentimes need to reframe a shot. Normally, Pan and Scan is used when formatting a widescreen image to fit standard definition screens. Generally speaking, the process takes a smaller portion of the original content, thus cropping or eliminating some of the shot. Once you've reframed a shot, you have the ability to apply keyframes to move or scan the scaling rectangle over time. With your playhead over the frame at which you want the pan to start, go to the Timeline menu and select Add Keyframe. You'll see an initial green keyframe marker inserted right under the playhead. Now, move your playhead further down the timeline within the shot. Again, from the Timeline menu, add a keyframe. You'll now notice a second green keyframe marker under the newly positioned playhead. You can now reposition the scaling rectangle to the desired framing. When you play back the timeline, the image will pan and scan between the 2 set keyframes. The Shapes tab is where you'll build the custom vignette shapes. Click on the New button on the right, and then proceed to click on the frames of your clip multiple times to create a mask shape. Choose between straight polygon shapes or B-splines. You can also name and save your custom shapes for future use. The next tab is the Tracking tab. Here is where you can track an object as it moves within multiple frames of your clip. Click on the New button and move or resize the tracking indicator that's now presented on the frame. The outer box is the search area for the tracker, and the inner box is the focus or bounding area that you wish to track. You might also want to set in and out points for the tracker. When the track has been defined, click Process. Once completed, you can then assign the track to a shape in the Shapes tab simply by entering the track number in the Use Tracker field. The Still Store lets you perform comparatives of multiple shots using a split screen. You can control the split with a wipe that acts both vertically, horizontally, or at an arbitrary angle. You can save any selected frame in the timeline to the Still Store simply by clicking on the Save button. To compare a frame that's in the Still Store with the frame that your playhead is on in the timeline, you navigate to the Still Store tab and double-click on the particular frame you wish to compare. Scrub the transition and angle fields with the middle mouse button to adjust the split. Once your clips have been graded, the final process is to render them. You can manage the entire process from within the Render Queue tab. The largest area in the Render Queue tab is the Render Queue table. Here you'll be able to see the different clips queued up for rendering. Click the Add All button to populate the render queue with your entire sequence. The following items are displayed: clip name, clip ID, in and out point, grade ID, and progress bar. The status of each clip is shown as queued, uploaded, rendered, or completed. Click Start Render to begin. Once the renders are complete, it's time to return the final graded version to Final Cut Pro. Choose File, Send to, Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro opens and creates an entirely new sequence inside your original project. This new sequence includes all of your original edits, now with the full quality grading you performed in color.